don't come. The government is falling apart. People who want to migrate now, if you have a good job back home,
Right.
please don't come. The best place to live is back home. Here you work to pay bills. There you have families and friends, you have good family time, friend time. Everybody knows everybody in the village. Here you don't even know your neighbor. You don't know the name is called. Nobody cares about you.
What do you feel as an individual? Why this happened?
Because the government is not following rules and regulations and people are not even following them.
Albertans are hurt and betrayed. That's how I think Albertans are feeling. I think Canada as a whole got a sense of that feeling of hurt and betrayal. And I think Albertans want, share my view, that we want to be able to have Alberta sovereignty within a united Canada. But we also would like to see Team Canada be on Team Alberta.
Blah, 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 blah. She sounds like a feminist, thinking she's not happy and wanting a divorce. Hello, it's August 2025. Now this video is inspired by a conversation that I had with someone, and during the conversation one might say there might be some revelations that have come to mind with regards to what's happening to Canada, for example. Now before I get into that particular topic, I'm just going to briefly mention and explain something. I'm going to be very simple about this, and it has to do with, for example, private individuals or corporations acquiring another corporation. And what we see a lot is when a business, a corporation, whatever, has been acquired, what we see is how the person doing the acquiring, or the entity doing the acquiring, will break up that business and basically, simply put, say, break it up into different businesses and sell that, because there's more profit to be made by doing that, breaking up an established business, than it is to keep the business going. Even if the business is doing very well, they'll still break it up. And this is where we see, for example, how 5,000 jobs are lost or whatever, because whoever took over the business has broken it up into little pieces and resold it, and there you have it. Why am I talking about this? And again, I just simplified this using layman's terms. What it has to do with Canada is this. One, we see, for example, Canada being crumbling, we'll say. And it's by design. And it's easier to take over a nation when the nation has, as a descriptive, fallen. And with Canada and the situation it's in, it's getting worse. And having now the Western provinces wanting to really become part of the United States, which would probably be a lot easier than becoming an independent nation themselves, they would be acquired by the corporate United States. Every country and every jurisdiction within each country is a corporation. Keep that in mind. So the United States would simply acquire part of, perhaps maybe down the road, all of Canada. Now just a segue for a moment, if you think about it, it's basically taking over a nation with no shots fired, no casualties of war in the traditional sense, but yet taken over. Now we can also say that, for example, with what's happening in Canada and other countries around the world, where people are talking about they're being invaded, but I'm not getting into that part. I'm just going to talk about Canada and the acquisition of at least half of Canada. And that part of Canada will be exploited. But I digress. When you look at, for example, and I mentioned this in videos as well, how this Jame Bouder, and I'm not going to talk about him too much, but I'm just going to mention him because it's part of this perhaps revelation that came to mind. He fled Canada to avoid criminal charges under the guise of political prosecution, and he's going to be, or he's in the process of political asylum in the USA. Now I mentioned this, how if that happens, then that would make the USA the heroes and further fuel those people, the 1 of 5, for example, in Alberta, who want to become American citizens, saying, yeah, look it, the US saved us. They did something good for somebody who really doesn't deserve it. But again, I'm not talking about him. And we have that playing out. Now the question is, why wouldn't he take his family? Because you can take your family for claiming political asylum, real or made up, as with this case. Because if the US does acquire the western half of Canada, then his family can just come down at any time they want because they're going to be part of the USA, which makes sense if you think about it. Why he didn't bring his family with him. So there's talk that this whole separation of the western provinces can happen faster than people think, even within a month or two. It could happen that fast. And I've mentioned, for example, how the Premier of Alberta is really exploiting this whole 1 in 5 Albertans, lowering the number of signatures from 600,000 to, I think it was like 160,000, lowering the bar to be able to do whatever it is that she wants to do. And you really have to listen to her wording when she's talking. For example, how when she says, I feel, so also how I feel that there are Albertans who would agree with me. Everything that she's doing is what she wants, whatever it is. I'm just going to stop here for a second. All these politicians are taking orders and everything is being told to them. They're just simply the front person delivering the messages, but perhaps this is how she actually feels inside. She's going against the very thing that she claims to be against, and that is having the minority of people, 1 in 5, dictate to the rest, the majority, on what to do and imposing that. Are you seeing what's happening here? So she, and it's not just her, but whoever is behind her, is part of the whole stage. And I've talked about how the so-called convoy of freedom was being, from its conception, whenever that was, depending on who you talk to, was actually orchestrated by USA officials. Yes, and there's evidence of that because some of these generals and stuff have been doing interviews talking about it. So it seems whoever it is in the States, or whoever's behind it all, has invested at least the past 5 years to make what's happening now with the separation of the Western provinces of Canada happen. And this James guy, he's just part of the theater, part of the show. And there's somebody who had done a video, a channel, talking about the Bohemian Grove, specifically about how Canadian politicians at different levels go to the Bohemian Grove, which happens once a year in Northern California. And I'm just going to try to make this super brief. Around 2000, there was a man by the name of Alex Jones. Probably many of you have heard of him. Either you like him or hate him. I'm kind of like, don't really care. And he had alleged to have infiltrated the Bohemian Grove and videotaped what they called mock human sacrifices and all this other stuff. More recent times it's come out that he never infiltrated, he never snuck in, he was actually invited, but that's a whole different tangent there. Everything is staged. But this Bohemian Grove, there's people, world leaders from all around the world to spend a week out there. As some politicians even said, I don't run around the woods naked like these other guys do and all this other stuff. And they're making decisions on what's happening. And anyone who's anyone in politics at any level have gone there, including Canadian politicians. Are you starting to see how everything's tying together and what is happening to Canada right now? It's not just Canada. There's other countries that are being destroyed from within for a reason. Because remember, every country, every nation is a corporation. And in today's world, I've talked about this in even recent videos, how it's the shareholders and investors that are more important to maximize their investment than it is anything else. So start connecting the dots here. Will the Western provinces actually become the United States? Well, based on connecting these particular dots, could very much happen sooner than people think. The stage has been set, all the pieces are all lined up, just a matter of when. There might be a delay, but it's highly probable it will happen. I just wanted to give you some things to think about and kind of expand further on this whole nonsense of the western half of Canada being acquired. But then the question remains, what about, for example, from Ontario to the East Coast? Who's going to be acquiring that? You have to think about that. So for people from Ontario to the East Coast, what are your lives going to be like? Things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
It's time to admit it. Canada's dying. I'm not talking about climate change or American annexation. I'm talking about mass immigration. For the last 40 years, politicians have used Canada's declining birth rate to justify ever-growing immigration laws. And what has it brought us? Our hospitals and schools are overrun, wages are stagnant, and housing is through the roof. But the consequences go far deeper than just economics. You see, Canada's more than just lines on a map or numbers on a graph. Canada is a nation, a distinct people with a shared history and culture. And you can't replace our people without fundamentally transforming our society. And that's exactly what's happening. Whole neighborhoods, even cities, are becoming more like foreign countries. Canada's becoming unrecognizable. And Canadians are starting to notice.
If you want to know whether or not you have been lied to, if you can't see anything wrong with the side you agree with, and you can't see anything right with the side that you disagree with, you have been manipulated. There's so many psyops that are happening all the time. Some of them, when you say psyops, a really, really good infomercial is a psyop.
Right.
So, but what we're talking about is the large scale.
Right.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me all the time, when is it going to get easier? When you die.